Hello.
Here we are again.
Happy Monday.
Can
you believe it? We're at the end.
We are here to show how to finish your Heirloom Feathers quilt.
Yes, I'm so excited. I cannot wait for you guys to finish this quilt up so you can post pictures in our VIP Facebook group. We're looking forward to seeing how these turned out. And we've seen a couple people post theirs along the way, which we love. So
yes, we do love that. And I can't decide if starting a new project is more exciting than finishing one. I think it depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think the start and the finish are probably the best part. Right.
You get through the middle, you're good.
Gail says you look like you're feeling better.
I am feeling better. I was so thankful that Sarah stepped in for me last Wednesday. I actually went home shortly after that. So.
And you guys don't know her as well as I do. That's saying something, because normally she will just work no matter what. So if she's going home because she doesn't feel good, then she don't feel good. So,
well, I think there's working, and then there's being on a live where you're supposed to smile,
and your nose hurts and all red.
And you need to blow your nose and sneeze and cough and all that. And that's not fun to watch either. So thank you, Sarah.
We're blaming it on Sarah. It came from her. So good morning. We're glad you're here. Hopefully you all are staying healthy and warm. It's a great time of year to be in your sewing room. That's for sure. So we have done so much over the course of 4 weeks. You want to kind of walk them through where we've been and then what we're going to do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So far what we did was the very first one, we did the block that has all the pieced feathers in the Heirloom Feathers. And then on the second session, what we did is we did the very middle of the quilt, which is, I think you can see me over to the side, this block right here. And it was actually 2 halves, and then they are sewn together. That's what we did the second session. The third session, which we did last time, we did the little corner, the corner block, which is a curved corner. It's curved on 2 sides and straight on the other. And then today we are going, and I showed you how to trim last week too. So if you need to know how to use the trimmer by George, you can always find the video on YouTube and the QR code on our instructions, or you can look for last week's session, session number 3, where I show you how to trim the curved block so that it has a little bit more information than what is on YouTube.
And how cool that you taught us how to trim a curve with the straight edge of the trimmer by George. So very cool.
Yeah. So then today what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to put it all together. I'm going to show you how to pin, how to sew a seam, where to sew that seam on. And then I'm going to show you how to press it, especially important if you did use wool, and then how to put the lining on. So, and how to turn it, and, you know, just prep it for putting the lining on and turning it. So we're going to learn a lot today.
Yeah. And so we're doing a lining, not sashing on the back. We did do sashing last week, I think it was.
I believe we did. On that's what Sarah did for me. Yes. Yep. That's what Sarah did Wednesday.
But because of the curve, we're gonna do a lining, which is cool. So
because and I'll be completely 100% honest, on a curved scalloped border like that, I do not want to put a binding on that.
No,
I just don't. It's just easier to line it.
I'd be stressed out watching you do it.
I would be stressed out doing it. So we did a lining on this one, which is very cool. Now, if you did the bonus blocks that have the same exact thing, only it has a straight edge, you can certainly, and we'll talk about that when I show you the lining. I'll talk about lining versus backing. If you use the straight one and you want to put binding on it. So we'll talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting that we've shown how to do a one-piece back in lives. We've shown the sashing in different lives. We were showing the lining in this live. So lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah, lots of different ways. So.
And the lining is one that I'm less familiar with watching you do. So I'm excited. Maybe I'll learn something today.
It's easy. It's probably the easiest.
Honestly. Here you go. You heard it here.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're starting here, right?
Yeah, let's start there. So I wanted to show everyone, and I know you have this with all your files and stuff. So if you can't see it on here, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I just wanted to show you on this picture of this quilt, you can see red lines running through the middle horizontally and vertically. So basically there are 9 blocks that you've stitched out, and you stitched 4 of each. So this just shows how it is divided. So Aubrey, if you can turn them then to the next page. The next page shows you how to sew it together. So row 1 are the blocks A, B, C, and they're all have a number 1 after it. So you can sew all those together, then sew the second row, which is A2, B2, and C2. And then the bottom row, which is row 3, you're gonna then sew all the blocks that have a number 3 after it. So you sew all those rows together, and then you sew the rows together to get a quarter of the quilt, which you see then over on the top right. And you'll do that 4 times so you can see the 4 of those. And then when you go to lay those out, you'll lay that first one out, and then you'll just keep doing a quarter turn. And then you'll sew each quarter together to make 2 halves, and then the 2 halves together. And I'm going to show you how to sew a seam here in just a minute. So let's stop there, and I'm going to show them. That's okay. We'll get to that in a minute.
All right.
Okay. So, and this is what 1/4 of the quilt looks like. Let me toss this
Here.
down on the floor.
Okay.
Okay. So I have, rather than do a whole quilt, which would take me a lot longer to show you how to do it, I have taken the A1 block that we did last week, and I have made 4 of those. And just a little tip, when this is going to make the cutest little table topper.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the corners. Look at that.
I know. So it's just so much fun. So you can have a little mug rug or candle mat that you can use. So get out your A1 files and make 4 of these. So what I have done is I have already sewn the 2, we have 4 of them. So I've sewn 2 together here and 2 here. And then I went and I want to show you how to press the seams. I'm going to show you how to pin these together and where to sew in just a minute. So this is a strip stick. It is basically, it's a wooden dowel cut in half, and it's covered and padded with fabric. And basically, if you used wool in your blocks, you want to make sure that you don't take your iron and press down on the ironing board like this, and because you know that will flatten all that wool that you have put in your quilt. So the strip stick is what you would use if you want to just press just on the seam. And so this little curved area just allows you to take the tip of your iron and press just exactly where you need it. We always tell you to press the seams in opposite directions. So this is pressed down towards me, and this one is pressed up. Then I always flip them over, and I press the front as well. So this, just a couple of tips on pressing if you're using wool, because we don't want you to lose the effect that the dimension that the wool gives you. So now let's talk about how to pin and where to sew your seam. So I'm going to do this with these 2 halves. So I'm going to put them right sides together. And you can see I have opposing seams because of how I pressed it. A lot of times you can try to kind of lock in those seams just like you could if you're doing quilting the traditional way. And the first thing I like to do is I'm going to use a pinning technique that's using anchor pins. So what my anchor pin does is it's going to find all the match points. I'm going to open this up again. You will have match points at the corners. You will have match point at these satin stitches, and you will have match point at the satin stitches around the flowers. And those match points are going to, this is where you want this to meet up perfectly with that, so that when we get done, we don't have anything that looks like that, but that it's matching perfectly. So I'm going to start over here, find my match point in this corner, and I'm going to just check the front. It's right there in the corner of that basting stitch. And I'm going to put that pin in the same area on the other one, but I'm going to leave my pin going straight through. What I'm not going to do is do not take your pin and put it back through there, because by doing so, you could be shifting this block against that block, and then your basting stitches won't match up. So here's my anchor pin. Now I'm going to take another pin, and this is the pin that I'm going to use and leave in there while I'm sewing. So I'm going to take this pin and I'm putting it just through the fabric where the seam allowance is. It's not going through the battleizer or anything, just through the seam allowance. So hopefully they can all see that. And then I can take it and put it back through the rest of the block. And then I can remove my anchor pin, but that anchor pin keeps it and holds it in place exactly where you need it to be. So my next match point is going to be where the satin stitch is. So I'm going to put it through the first side, and I'm probably not going to be able to show you very well on the camera, but then I'm also, and this is on the outside of that satin stitch, I'm putting it through the same spot on the block behind it. And you can kind of check on both sides. If I look here, I'm off by like half a stitch. So this is where you can go in and realign your pin if you need to. So this is my anchor pin. This is going to hold everything exactly where it needs to be. And then I'm going to take a second pin, and that goes through the seam allowance and then through the block. Then you can take your anchor pin out. So I'm going to continue doing that throughout the rest of my block here. I'm going to do the satin stitch that's on the, like a Dresden flower kind of in the middle. I'm going to match those two anchor points, leave my anchor pin in, and then take my second pin just through the fabric, through the seam allowance, and then back through the block. And then your anchor pin can come out. Now I have my block intersection here. So I'm going to do the same thing where that seam is. I'm checking to make sure it's where I want it. And now I'm going to put that anchor pin through the blocks behind it, right exactly in the same spot. That's my anchor pin. So then again, I'm going to come through with my pin that stays in there. And sometimes I may even put two on either side of that anchor pin if it's a, like an intersection like that, where you've got two, where you've got a seam. So now I'm going to do the end here. Again, it's my anchor pin, and then put my regular pin through the seam allowance and then through the quilt. I have one left, and that is where that satin stitch is on the other side. And it looks like it landed perfectly the first time. That's a nice bent pin. And then through the seam allowance and back through the quilt. So I think I'm ready to go to stitch this. I wanted to show everyone where you stitch. So here we have our block, and hopefully you're able to see this, but you can see the basting stitch that stitched in one of the final steps of when we made the block and the hoop. You're going to be stitching right on that basting stitch. You're going to put a neutral color thread or thread that's going to match and look good with all this in your needle, and match your bobbin thread with that. And you're going to choose a walking foot. You're going to, a lot of times I will even lengthen my stitch. My default stitch on my machine is a 2.4. I may even lengthen it just a little bit to like a 2.7 or a 2.8. And that is so that it's going to be, it helps everything move along quite a bit. And then you don't have to worry about that long straight, that length of the stitch, because you will go in afterwards and you're going to do I almost called it a serendipity stitch. Serpentine stitch. So I'm going to go to the machine. It's all set up like I had mentioned. Then I'm going to sew right on top of that.
Awesome. It's looking good.
Okay, you want to pop that up there?
Yeah.
Because I can't see that where it is. We have a question. So Diana asks, can you pin to ease the fullness across the entire 2 blocks to be joined, and then add the anchor pins? Can you pin to? I would first of all add the anchor pins, There typically will not be a lot of fullness that you'd have to ease in there because it's been digitized to be pretty much the same size. So start first with your anchor pins. And then, you know, if you feel there's any fullness to, typically in our quilts, there's not.
I would think too, if you're pinning it before the anchor pin, you're not going to get it lined up
Right.
exactly. The point of the anchor
Right.
pin is to be able to move it right where you want it. So we're going to say, no, don't do that.
Yeah. Just start with those anchor pins. Okay, so we are over here at the machine. And what I like to do is I like to begin sewing, like just right a little bit onto the battleizer. So I might start with my first stitch right there, and then I will go in reverse and then go forward again. That'll kind of lock that in. Oh, Sarah likes to sew without, I'm going to be sewing with the start stop button because I'm using Sarah's machine. So wish me luck. Okay, so I'm going to begin sewing where I said. I'm going to do a couple stitches back, and then I'm going to go forward. And then I always take my pins out. I never sew over my pins. And I'm sewing right directly on that basting stitch. And then I just went and sewed over a pin because I'm using a start stop button. I missed it though. That's the good news. Okay, maybe I should slow that down a bit. So now I'm at the seam, the intersection where the seam is. I'm going to just take a couple stitches. I'm going to take out that other pin and just sew right across there, sewing right on that basting stitch. And the other thing too is if for some reason maybe you have a hard time seeing where that basting stitch is because it's water soluble thread that's stitched on white batting, the other thing you can do is grab a friction pen and just draw a line where that is, and then that'll come out later. Okay, so I'm getting towards the end, and then I did a little back stitch there too. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, and we'll see how we did. Look at that. That's so cute.
It is super cute.
It is super cute. Now, I don't have an iron here, so we're just going to pretend that we're ironing it, okay? We're going to be finger pressing. So now I'm going to go over and I'll show you how to do the lining.
I got to say, this is a great comment. So Gail's saying on YouTube that lengthening the stitch has helped her a lot when doing that joining stitch. So that's awesome.
Okay, so here we are. This is my phony pressing. Everything works better if you press it. The other thing that Gail reminded me of when you read that is that sometimes if ever you're and this is for making a regular quilt block, or even this, is that if for some reason you have a lot of thickness in the seam, first when you have your stitch lengthened, pin just there and then sew over that and open it up. And then you can see, yes, it's matching exactly where I want it. Then you can pin the rest and go back and sew it again.
That's a good tip.
That's
too.
another tip that I've had to use from time to time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to follow our instructions. So if you could go to the next page, there we go. So if we're going to line a quilt, what we're going to do is you're going to make your lining, and your fabric requirement sheet will tell you exactly how big to cut, how much yardage you're going to need. And then if you're lining it, you're going to cut that fabric like 3 to 4 inches larger than what your quilt is. Your 8-inch blocks, your lining, you're going to have to piece it together, because I think it's like you're going to have to cut it like 50 inches. So you're going to have to do a little piecing there, and that is really not a big deal. So you can see there that the blue that you see in the picture, that is our lining fabric, and it's right side up on your cutting table or wherever you're laying your quilt at. Then you're going to take your quilt and you're going to put it so that the right sides are together on over the top of your lining fabric. And all right, so let's go back over here. Sorry, Aubrey, I'm having her jump around. So here's my little baby lining, and we're going to take it and we're just going to center it over a backing fabric. So our right sides are together, and you're going to pin all around it, but you're going to make sure that when you sew it, you're going to leave an opening.
Did you want different pins?
Nope, I want these. I want other pins for later.
I vaguely remember you saying something about pins earlier, and now I'm like, uh-oh.
So if you want to tape your lining fabric, you can do that. It's probably really not necessary to do that, but just start pinning with your straight pins all around your quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's going to bug me because it's not pressed. Always press, then sew. Let me turn this. So I'm going to continue pinning.
Do you want to go press it real quick?
Nah.
All right.
I'll just complain and struggle the whole time.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
It's Monday.
Right. Murmuring Monday. Okay, I'm almost there. I keep grabbing this one little pin I don't like.
What pins do you guys like? Because Sandra says hers always like to bend, and she would like some stronger, better pins. But we have some bent pins too.
Oh yeah, we
so
definitely have some bent pins. So you just go buy new ones. Okay, so remember you do have to leave an opening. So on this piece here, I'm going to leave this open. Maybe I'll just leave it open from here to here. So I'm going to put a pin here. Look at that, Sandra. It's bent.
Time for new pins.
Right. So I'm going to put that pin there. What I like to do is I know I'm going to start there, but then I'll start sewing and I'll end up enclosing the whole thing. So what I like to do is this is where I want to stop. I will put two pins side by side.
Smart.
And that tells me that's the end and I need to stop there. So now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to begin stitching. And again, I'm sewing right on that basting stitch. So let me go over there and I'll do that.
It's kind of like when you're baking and you need how many spoonfuls or cups of something and you put spoons out.
Yes. Okay, so here we are. Machine is set up the same way. I am going to go back to just my default stitch length, and I still have the walking foot and all that on there. So this is where I was going to begin. So I'm going to take that pin out and I'm going to do just a couple back stitches. That was supposed to be back stitches, but this is what happens when you don't have a foot control and you're sewing with a start stop. Sarah must be better at this than I am, but I am sewing right on that basting stitch. And then I'm going to leave my needle in a down position. I'm going to pivot when I get to that curvy point. And if you need to stop once in a while and lift up your presser foot and adjust for that curve, go ahead. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times you can just spin it as it sews, but if you need to stop, just stop like so and just do a little tiny pivot. I think we're doing good. I'm going to take my pin out. I really think this is going to make a cute little mug rug or candle mat, whatever you want to use it for. I'm going to take this pin out. Okay, so I'm in that seam again where the direction of the circle is going to change. So I have my needle in the down position and I'll lift up my presser foot a little and I'll make that turn so I can sew on the curve going the other direction. So you can see you can just gradually be turning as you go. Get that pin out to make that curve nice. I did slow my machine down. That certainly helps too, especially on curves. Okay, and there is another direction change where I hit the seam allowance and my curve's going to go the other way. So I'll lift my presser foot again with my needle in the down position, and I'll make a little pivot. I'm just sewing right on that basting stitch and turning as I go. Going to remove the pin, and I'm coming across another seam and going to again lift my foot up and with the needle down, and I'm going to do a little pivot. You can see here's my double pins. This is telling me I need to stop right there because we need to leave some room for turning your quilt. So I'm going to take these out. Do a locking stitch right there. And right here, I might even just go back a couple stitches because of the stress that sometimes it takes when you're turning that. All right, so we are good to go. We're going to go back to the cutting table. All right, so here we are. So now we're going to cut our lining fabric so that it's even with our quilt. You can use the scissors or you can use the trimmer by George in the method that I showed you last week. So what we're going to do is we are just trimming this even. Say bye-bye lining fabric.
This actually is looking pretty simple, the lining part.
It is really simple. And you could do this lining method with any quilt. It doesn't always have to have a binding on it. You can even put a flange in there as well if you're
feeling
fancy and want to really dress it up. Put the flange layer in between the quilt and the lining. Then when you turn it, you'll be able to see it.
Judy on YouTube says, great hints for completing this project. I agree. I feel like there was a lot of good little nuggets in there.
Good.
Even just the double pin so you don't make that mistake of,
oh, yeah.
Oh, I'll remember. I'll remember to leave that open.
I know where to stop. I know there's 4 little curved blocks
I know
there.
I need to turn it. Anybody else made that mistake?
Almost there. Okay, so we have our lining even with our quilt, our little mini quilt. So the other thing you need to do is, since we have something on a curve, there's going to be some additional prep that you need to do before you turn it. And what we suggest you do is that you make some little V clips in there. So you're going to take your little scissors. You just need to be careful that you do not cut where you just sewn to sew your block together. But by making these little V clips in there, that when you turn it, you're not going to have it trying to turn and it'll lay flatter. You won't have all that bulk of all that fabric. And it just helps it lay a lot nicer. So just go around your quilt, doing the little V clips. Okay. Are there any questions there, Aubrey, while I do this?
So I am obviously not the smartest person on this live today. So let me read this because I'm like, wait a minute, am I understanding this correctly? Okay, Sandra on YouTube, she says that she has used a basting stitch with Vanish Light thread to put her blocks together. This way I can rip out any stitches I need to redo. So I think you're just saying just to make sure it's lined up.
The seams. It sounds
Yeah?
like the seams when
Okay.
she's sewing these seams.
Okay.
There you go.
I think that's what Sandra means. Catherine's asking, what about pinking shears? Could you do pinking shears instead of what you're doing right now?
You could use the pinking shears. The only thing that I would worry about is that it would not leave a big enough seam allowance. But make a little mat like this.
Try it out. Let us know, Catherine. Also, Carol, I highly doubt this. I feel like you know what you're doing. She said, I need all the hints I can get.
I wanted to show them too. When you get to where the intersection is, just clip. One straight clip in where that is, and V clips all around the other areas.
Okay. So Diana says that she likes the V snips, and Teresa wants to know, when you say flange, what do you mean by a flange?
Oh, maybe we can find a quilt that has a flange in it. It's typically done with binding. And it's an addition to the binding. And it just is another little peak of fabric that you will see. Maybe we can find an example of it somewhere. Okay. All right. So this is the area where we have left open for turning. And you're still going to continue with your little V clips in there. And this just makes it lay so much nicer.
And we will hold this up and show you a close-up too. I feel like that might be good.
Yes. Need a zoom lens on that camera.
This is what I love about either a workshop or a sew along, because I feel like you gave so many nice tips that even if you might have wrote them in the instructions, it's nice to see exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. And even a lot of you have a lot of great tips too, like the vanish light on the seam. Okay, so you can see where we have our V clips, and now when we turn it, it's going to lay flatter, and you're not going to have fabric trying to lay on top of the fabric there. So then you can turn your quilt.
Plus, I want this candle mat. I would use it for candles. I think it's so cute. Yeah, Loretta said that this is showing how to do this with this curved edge is going to help her with hugs and kisses too. So she's probably doing the bonus border.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Diane. Visual always is best, right?
Watching somebody do it and listening to them tell how to do it is always much easier. So I haven't even pressed it, and it looks pretty flat. I see a spot here where I need to. Sometimes I have a scissors with a blunt edge, and sometimes I'll take that in there and just kind of push all those seams right out to the edge. And then I will take it over to my iron, and I will, when I'm satisfied with it, and I will press those edges in. And again, just make sure if you're using wool that you're just doing just the outside edge of it. And then the other thing you'll do is you're going to press these edges in with your iron. I should tell you that sometimes it's easier to press these edges in prior to turning it. That's another tip that I forgot to tell you. But then once these are all pressed in and it looks good and you like it, then all you do is top stitch around the very outside edge of it.
Cool.
And I usually use matching thread. Unless you want it to show, but I usually use the matching thread.
Very good.
So that's how you do the lining. Then once all that's done, you will also, you're going to take, you can either use a straight stitch and you're going to stitch in the ditch, or you can use that serpentine stitch and make kind of a wavy stitch. Sometimes that serpentine stitch, if you're using wool, will help it lay a little bit flatter, so you can decide which stitch you want to use. And then you'll see that stitching on the back, and that's what holds the lining to the rest of your quilt.
And this is just the corners of Heirloom Feathers. Like, that's amazing.
I know. And so here's this Heirloom Feathers that's been lined. It's top stitched. And then you can see the straight stitch that goes through there on the back. And when you do the straight stitch, use your monopoly thread and the needle on the bobbin, because then no matter what color you're sewing through on the front of your quilt, you won't be able to worry about the thread showing. So that's what we have for you today. I'm wondering if I forgot anything. Probably. Any more questions?
Okay, I have a couple starred. Okay, this is just a comment from Carolyn. She said, I read the instructions and sometimes it goes over my head. Love to watch first. I think it's smart to watch first. And then when you go back to read it, you're like, okay,
Right.
I remember what she was saying.
Right. So I have my hoop scissors here and I'm just trying to, because now I know I need to finish this because Aubrey wants it. But I'm just going through here where the seams
Well, I
are.
can't have it because Linda already commented on YouTube and said, looks like Nina's getting a new mug room.
Oh, you're gonna have to arm wrestle for it.
Okay, a couple other things. I do see Linda on YouTube says that she did the 8-inch blocks with Frankenbat, and with all the excess, she was able to get 4 more blocks. That's awesome. Maybe you could explain what Frankenbat is for anyone who might not know.
Okay, Frankenbat is basically, I'm looking around for some battleizer. Basically what Frankenbat is if you have your batting, and when we trimmed our blocks, we usually had a slice of battleizer that was left over. And what you're going to do is you're going to take those 2 pieces of Frankenbat, you're going to butt them right upside against each other. Make sure they're not overlapping because you don't want any extra bulk in your quilt. Just make sure they're butted right up against each other. And then you're just going to sew a zigzag stitch, and you can use those scraps of battleizer to hoop it again to do the next block.
And Joni's still in Maui.
Oh, and it's dark
and
there.
She's gonna watch it later.
She's gonna watch the sunrise.
Oh, we're still jealous, Joni. Okay, I have a question from Diana on YouTube. She says, how far away from the edge is the top stitch?
You know, let me see if I can show this to you. I think if I show the back, it might be a little easier. And of course, the thread is hard to see, but it's just a little tiny bit. It's just to keep it all laying nice and flat. It doesn't have, if you're doing the 5-inch, it might be a little closer to the edge. I would say like that close. I don't have a measurement there for you. If you're doing the 8-inch, you could maybe go in
really
even
close.
A little further.
Okay, and then here's a great tip. Trisha says that she uses chopsticks to poke out her corners.
That's a good idea.
We always like it when we can find something simple that you might have laying around.
And it seems like between the paper from the kitchen, can't think of the word. Parchment paper. The cold medicine is still doing a thing on me. The parchment paper and the chopsticks, just go in the kitchen. There's a tool in there you can use in your sewing room.
Okay.
I wanted to show them this too. This also,
all
by itself would make an amazing quilt, candle mat or mug rug, but also make a pillow to go to also make that room look beautiful. That has this in so many things. This is a little 5-inch, but the 8-inch would make a really nice size pillow, and just keep repeating these blocks and make just a quilt on its own.
There's so many blocks within there that you could definitely play with. So, okay. Well, this has been awesome. I feel like I'm excited to see what you all do with these quilts, and we hope that you post them in our dealer group. I'm going to ask Nina to actually drop the link. So if you're watching today and you don't have the quilt, but you're like, ooh, I might want to do this, it is still on our website and you can grab it. But we wanted you to know that if we didn't get your question answered, or maybe you were too shy to type it in the comments, we can help you one-on-one as well. Sometimes that's even easier. And Nina will answer the phone or return your email. So her contact information is right there on screen. So we hope that you have enjoyed this sew along and can't wait to see all these pretty finished quilts for sure. Okay, the other thing that I want everyone to know is we do have another workshop coming up next week. Spring Things is what it's called. And I am so excited to be talking about things that are warmer. Even if it stays cold and we're stuck in your sewing room, at least we can be thinking about spring. So next Wednesday already, I can't believe it's next
I
Wednesday.
know.
Next Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to introduce you to that new design and show you how to stitch it out. In fact, day 2, Sarah has also committed to doing the no hand sew sleeve method,
Which is awesome.
so day 2, she's actually going to show you how to put a sleeve on the back of your quilt that you do not have to hand sew, which was a big hit when she did that. I forget what design it was. I think it was Spooky Cute, maybe.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're going to do it for this design as well. So day 2 is going to have a lot of really great information in it as well. So go ahead and get registered for that, because if you do, you're going to get that super duper cute coaster. And we're challenging whoever posts that in our VIP group, their completed coaster. Your name is going to go into a drawing for a $25 store credit giveaway. Okay. So awesome. All right, you all. Great tips today. They're saying good
Yeah,
job.
well, good.
All right. Well, if you guys need anything, you know how to get a hold of us, and we'll see you next week for a whole nother workshop.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.